If you're anything like me and the modern millennial, you wake up in the morning and you take out your phone to get on social media. So let's all mentally open our Facebooks, Instagrams, and picture yourself scrolling through your feed. You might see pictures of your friends, of dogs, whatever shows up in your timeline, but then you see a picture of a child refugee standing, crying, barefoot in the ground, smoke in the background, and then you swipe right past it. We've all been here. We've all swiped right past these things because we often don't know what to do about them. So what can we do about things like that? We can't solve these world problems from our bedrooms, right? But maybe we can do more than you think. I believe the world's largest scale issue today is the lack of empathy and understanding for others. And I spent years learning about this after observing that people, even the strongest relationships, can be torn apart through things as simple as disagreements, but it doesn't have to be like that. So I want to talk about not only how and why empathy is needed, but also why we should be motivated to want to use it. If after watching this speech you stop and read a little more in depth into one media post that you wouldn't have otherwise done, my goal will have been a success. So empathy might be cool, but what is the problem? The problem is that empathy is on the decline. Doctor of Psychology Marcia Reynolds summarizes a study conducted by Sarah Conrath at University of Michigan, which shows a 40% decrease in levels of empathy of college students from the 70s to the 2000s. And if the college-age generation says anything about our society as a whole, empathy is statistically headed in the wrong direction. But before we get too far, I realized that a lot of my friends don't actually know exactly what empathy means. So the simplest definition I could find from lexico.com is the ability to understand and share feelings of another. Now, feelings in this case denote our emotions, not our opinions. And that is important because it means that we can empathize with someone while fully disagreeing with their opinion. So why is empathy declining anyways? Statistics like the ones previously mentioned don't appear without a cause. We actively choose to forego empathy. As shown in an experiment by the American Psychological Association, retrieved from the Science Daily site, even when empathy doesn't require a financial or emotional burden, people will still choose the easy way out and avoid empathizing. Part of this may be explained by our biology and the ideas of in-group and out-group. An article by clinical psychologist Kim Armstrong from the Association for Psychological Services shows in a study that people are going to increase or have an increased level of brain activation while viewing members of their own race, for instance, experience pain than members of another race. Even subconsciously, many of us suffer from these natural biases. But this lack of empathy is not confined to our research labs, it's also shown in our workplaces. According to medical doctor Helen Reese in the Greater Good magazine posted by UC Berkeley, doctors practicing without empathy lead to worse experiences for both the patient and the provider. On a world scale, wars take the lives of millions, oftentimes without people truly considering what's going on beneath the surface. Take the 1925 incidents at Petrich, for example, where the Greeks and the Bulgarians were at a peaceful standoff until a dog, followed by its owner trying to retrieve it, ran across that neutral line. The owner was shot along with 50 more people before the incident was resolved for peace. Which, to be fair, wars and other conflicts like this often are built on generations of intense complexity and differing of ideas and opinions, which only further illustrates why empathy is crucial. In fact, 2020 is as chaotic of a year as many of us have ever seen, and as many sources call for, we need an empathy revolution. But how does one lead a revolution with empathy? First and foremost has to do with the value we place on people. In a study by Batson, from the same article published by Dr. Helen Reese, simply choosing to assign value to the people that we have conversations with increases their ability to perspective take and their overall empathy ability. And this makes sense because if we don't value someone, we won't be able to truly understand things from their perspective. Second, we should practice active conversations where we both listen and open ourselves up to being vulnerable. One group, the Israeli-Palestinian Parents Circle, does exactly this by bringing families from the opposing sides together to listen and talk. As quoted by Roman Kurznik in the Nikos Marino Psychodynamic Psychotherapy site, sharing stories about how their loved ones died enables families to realize that they share the same pain and the same blood despite being on opposite sides of a political fence. Third, I know you've all heard of the idea of putting yourself in someone else's shoes, but according to Victoria Shire from the University of Peace, what we should aspire for is not just putting ourselves in someone else's shoes, but understanding how they feel in their shoes. This is the technique used in the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. After the US discovered the secret location of missiles right off the Florida coast, tensions were at an all-time high, and had it not been for a US chief aide suggesting a more empathetic and tactile approach, a nuclear war could have very easily ensued. The result instead was that the Soviet Union agreed to pull its missiles from Cuba in exchange for the United States pulling its missiles from Turkey. All of these examples came with background, but speaking from the heart, I think there's so many more things that we should be doing, such as challenging our prejudices, becoming curious about people and issues, focusing attention on the needs of others, and above all else, temporarily suspending our own judgment and opinions to be able to do these things. Although sparse, there is some research to support an alternate view of empathy, and if you pull up the slides that I attached there, I will explain to you a study done by Tali al and found in the previously mentioned UC Berkeley site, where they took people, if you just look at this top half here, they took a group of people and they had them watch a movie, and they video recorded them doing that. And then what they did is they took these two groups on the bottom, and they showed them this video. But the difference here is that these people were only able to see the expressions of the people, whereas this group number 2, was able to see only the movie. And so the test was to see who could empathize better. And it turned out that the group who watched just the movie was more able to accurately predict the emotions of the original people watching the movie than were this group. So that suggests that the accuracy of empathy, might not be present. And so that being said, the same study showed that this group, the first group that watched the people's emotions, was more able to increase the reflection and contemplation, which is the target goal of empathy. It is interesting that visualization plays an important role in speaking, but it's also interesting that visualization is a crucial technique in empathy. Can you imagine being that refugee child? Can you imagine having your home blown apart by a war that you're neither involved in or want any part in? Can you, or many of us have experienced the loss of a loved one, but have you ever lost someone not through death, but through simply knowing whatever happened to them? Now picture again, but picture people like these living happy and peaceful lives. Like many of us, shopping, hanging out with friends, having the privilege of eating, breathing, and sleeping with relative peace. Shouldn't everyone deserve this opportunity? It all starts with empathy and understanding. The world is a vicious cycle, and lack of empathy on individual, societal, and international levels stand as a tall barricade in the way of world progress. The cycle can be broken on each of these levels by assigning human value, being a vulnerable listener, and trying to see things through the lens of another. What we need to do is use our empathy to engage in active conversations with those of different genders, backgrounds, political beliefs, different ideas of change, ideas of purpose. What we should be is more curious about challenging our own beliefs and biases. It is only through empathy that the world can successfully move forward. So next time that you scroll through social media, next time you hang out with friends, watch a movie, dig a little bit deeper, and together we can create an empathy revolution from our bedrooms.